right now what we want to do is we want to get in and we want to see some of the cool stuff that we can do inside of BCC 9. Now, one thing that I always kind of jokingly say I can never stress this enough, and I said it at NAB, and I sort of say it all the time when I talk about, Boris Effects elements. You know, people hear the company name Boris Effects, so that's the first thing they think. They think, oh, effects. They think of glows and things like that. But BCC9 is really so much more than that. It's really an essential toolkit of not only, of course, effects that you're going to be able to use like glows and lens flares and things like that, but there are other essential tools in here that you're really going to need to fix problems that you're going to run into on a daily basis, of which I'm going to show you a few of those situations today. And the best part is that almost all of the effects inside of BCC9 are real time. You can take them, drop them into your timeline, basically hit the space bar, and there you go, you're off to the races. Now, you're going to see inside of the effect palette that some of them aren't, and I'm going to explain why they aren't. You're going to see why the team was very clever in doing things the way that they've done them with BCC9. Okay, so let's start out. Now, I always jokingly say that there are two things that editors hate doing more than anything. The first one, of course, is chroma key. The second one, of course, is motion tracking. And we're going to talk about one of those two right now. We're going to talk about chroma key. Now, the reason that you shouldn't hate doing chroma key inside of Media Composer using BCC9 is that Boris Effects' chroma keyer is an award-winning chroma keyer that has now gotten better. Now, of course, the question is, well, how's it gotten better? Well, let's take a look. We've got this situation here, and what I'm going to do here is I've got my little GoToWebinar panel that I'm just going to move. No one, I don't think, can see that, so I'm just moving that out of the way so that I don't have to see it. And what we've got is we've got this little bit of a situation where we have our man here who apparently has been shipped somewhere, and he's sitting in a cardboard box. And, very cleverly, whoever shot this has decided to put this on sort of a curved cyc wall. And basically, it's led us to a couple of interesting problems. I mean, the main problem right away is that what most people would do in a situation like this is we're going to call up the effects palette by simply hitting Command and 8 on the Mac control and 8 on Windows. I will point out that, of course, I am using the Mac version. PC version works identical. I'll call out the shortcuts to obviously both Mac and Windows as we go along. And what we want to do is we want to head to the keys and blend section. And what we're going to do, you're going to notice right up here that we have the original chroma key effect located right here. But what we want to do is actually go one step below that, right here to Chroma Key Studio. I'm going to take Chroma Key Studio, I'm going to drag and drop it down here onto the shot. And what most people do immediately, I'm just going to step into effects mode. Now I have effects mode mapped on my keyboard to Shift and Y. If you don't have it mapped, no problem. What I'm going to do is just bring my effects editor back. You can actually find it right here, effects mode right there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to come right down to the bottom of the effect. Now this is something I normally save till kind of later in the demo, but I think inside of Chroma Key Studio it's actually a great place to show this. And that is that we have so many great little hidden features in many effects actually located right down at the bottom. And two of them inside of Chroma Key Studio are geometrics and drop shadow. Now what most people do immediately right off the bat is they come down to the bottom because what they want to do is they actually want to crop this to get rid of as much of this cyc wall as they can. So obviously you're only doing the chroma key to what you need to. The only problem, of course, we run into here is that once I crop over to here, we still have all of the cyc wall up here, which obviously gives us, a major problem. It's actually not as bad on the right-hand side. But this gives us a big problem. Most people then, sort of get in and they, start messing around this, trying to get this to work, and they're like, yeah, you know what, forget it. We're just going to do this in After Effects. But the whole point is that you don't need to do everything inside of After Effects. Don't get me wrong, After Effects is a fantastic application, and I use it all the time. But the thing is that in many cases, this is the type of effect that you could actually do right inside of Media Composer. I'm going to show you how we can create a very cool, very realistic composite right here in our timeline. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to head back to the effects palette. I'm just going to reset everything. We're going to take Chroma Key Studio. I'm going to drag it and drop it onto my shot. And I said before, cropping isn't the way that I would do this. Well, how would I do it then? Well, believe it or not, we actually have some tools inside of Chroma Key Studio that are there. You just don't necessarily know they're there. But they're fantastic features that you definitely need to be using. Now, you're going to see up here in the upper right-hand corner of the effects palette that we actually have some buttons. If I hover over top of them, you'll see I get the tooltips. The first tooltip, of course, is the standard UI widgets, which I actually have right here. Now, in this case, I don't have any other widgets other than just the position crosshairs. But you're going to see if I come to the next one here, we have something called Custom Spline UI. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, I'm going to show you. In this case, what I need to do is I actually need to get in and do some cropping. So what I'm going to do is navigate over here to the effects editor, and we're going to set the outside mask shape, which is currently set to off. You'll see that I can actually change it to be a rectangle. I can come down here, I can make it an egg shape, which is actually very cool. You can see you can get in and adjust the size of the egg however you want, but that's not what we want. What we want to do is we want to go one step further and use a spline mask. Now, something that's important to keep in mind before I go on is that any spline masking that we do inside a Media Composer, the spline itself is always closed. It's not like in After Effects where when we click around in a spline, it's open until we click that last point. So what's going to happen is if I start clicking around inside of my sequence window here, it's immediately going to close it, and it's going to be hard for me to see what's happening. So let's head on over and let's actually bypass the effect. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to come to the Custom Spline UI, and all I'm going to do is simply start clicking in here. And you'll see that I can even get in and do some Bezier curves if I wanted to, just kind of like that, just click and drag. And here we go, just like that. Now, of course, nothing has happened because we are bypassing the effect. What we're going to do before I move on here is I'm just going to switch back to the standard UI widgets, and I'm not going to bypass the effect anymore. And you'll see now that I've got a very cool mask that I've created here. Now, something that's important to also keep in mind is that let's say I didn't want to position my, I'll call him a man in a box. I guess I don't know what else I'd call him, man in a box. If I wanted to position him over on the left-hand side of the screen, most people think that I would immediately come down and just say, oh, okay, let's take the position, let's just move it like that. Oh, well, that's not doing what I want it to do. Reason being is that because I have the geometric set to pre-apply, he's moving inside the mask. If I set him to be post-apply, now I can position him where I want to go. Only thing that's important to keep in mind is that the original spline is going to stay where it is. So just make sure that you've got everything set up the way you want. Now, for the purposes of what we're doing, he's going to stay where he is. He's going to stay in the middle of the screen. Okay. Now, most people think, okay, that's kind of cool, and you can kind of see what's happening. So let's get in. Let's actually do the chroma key itself. All I'm going to do is twirl down chroma key, simply grab our eyedropper. I'm going to come over to, I don't know, maybe about here. Just eyedrop it right there. And you can see that this created an OK key. We still have some issues going on here that we are going to fix up quick and easy. Now, what I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit. I'm going to bring up the Pan tool by simply holding Command and Option on the Mac, Control and Alt on Windows. And you can see that we got a few issues going on here. Obviously, I can see the hard edge of the mask that I created. We've also got this sort of bright edge that's going on around him that we'll fix as well. But the first thing I need to do is I need to see exactly what's going on with the key. Let me just zoom back a second here. And we can do that very easily by coming to our view options. I'm just going to switch from the final composite right down here to the chroma key matte. And you can see that I now have a good representation of what this is looking like. Now you can see that I actually didn't quite get the spline the way I wanted it to. So let's just adjust that a little bit. Perfect. Okay, so you can see how getting in and adjusting the points inside of your spline, very, very simple. Or inside of your mask is super simple. Okay, let's zoom back a little bit here. I'm actually pretty happy with this, but if I wanted to get in, I could actually adjust this just a little bit by adjusting the lightness here. There we go. So we're just dealing with the shadow on the floor. Okay. What I'm going to do for right now is just switch right back to my final composite because we still have a couple issues going on. What I'm going to do is just zoom right in here so that I can see my man in a box's arm. And let's fix what's going on here. We're going to do a little bit of a matte choke. Now, most people get a little bit nervous about this, because in most cases, matte choke doesn't work quite the way you want. Now, I should stop what I'm doing right now. Because in the past, how I would have had to have done this is that I would have had to have taken chroma key, drop it on, do my chroma key. Oh, I want to do a matte choke. Okay, so let's go and let's get the matte choke effect. Let's take that, let's drop that on. Oh, you want to do a light wrap. Let's take that effect. Let's drop that on. And then you're constantly adding these effects on top of each other, stacking them on top of each other. Well, the whole point of Chroma Key Studio is that I don't need to do that anymore. I now have all of these tools located inside of the effect itself. You'll see that right here I have matte cleanup, I've got matte choker, I've got color correction, and I've got light wrap all located right inside the effect. Oh, by the way, remember I told you it's a green dot, so it's a real-time effect that can play back in your timeline. Okay, so let's do our matte choke here. What I'm going to do is simply come to matte choker, and I'm going to turn it on. And as soon as I do, you're going to see what happens. We're going to get a huge matte choke here that really just softens us up and removes a lot of stuff that we might want to keep in there. Now, I don't want it to be this extreme. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my blur back to be something like, I don't know, 1. You'll see we get a lot of that back now. What I'm also going to do is I'm just going to take the choke all the way up, and let's just take the gray soften all the way up. And believe it or not, it actually looks worse now than it did before. But that's okay, because we're going to fix that right now. All I'm going to do now is once I've got the blur at 1, the choke at 127, and the gray soften at 100, is just start backing off on the gray soften. And you'll see, and I'll just zoom in a little bit further here, you'll see that that edge is starting to disappear. Now, once I get to about there, I'm not going to get rid of all of it. I'm going to get rid of about 90% of it. You'll see that that's what it is now. Let me just zoom back in on his head here. I'm just going to bring this back up to 3. You'll see the difference before, and let me just undo that, and after. You'll see that we got a lot more definition around his hair, on his arm, and that's looking pretty good. Now, there is one last thing that I need to do. Because he's in this master control, I'm going to call this a master control because it kind of looks like a master control of a TV station, is I need to add a light wrap to him. So all I'm going to do, again, exactly what I did with Matt Choke. Let's just turn light wrap on right there, and you'll see, I should zoom in here again. Take a look around his arm. There we go. Now, of course, the question is, most people think, well, is this light wrap actually, you know, taking this information here and actually using that in the light wrap? Well, take a look around his head, color bars, okay? Again, we're going to come right back up to the top. Let's come back to our final composite. Let's actually come right down here to wrap on black. And take a look. There are those color bars exactly the way that they were. And you can see how they break up right here. Of course, we got the light wrap from the actual monitors that were behind him. But you can see what we now have is a very realistic looking composite, or a realistic looking chroma key, except of course for one problem. The key is very good, but he doesn't really look like he's sitting in the studio. Well, this is now, because we've taken, and in most cases how this worked in the past is because I had applied these 3 effects already, we're sort of at the limit as to, you know, kind of what we, you know, could do. But because I can now add a lot of this stuff inside a chroma key, let's add 2 more effects on top of this to take the realism to the next level. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to close the effects editor here. Let's come back into the effects palette, and let's come up to our color and tone. And I think I'm going to use color balance. This is a great way to get in and alter, so just that, the color balance of a shot. If we wanted to add more blue, add more red, take some blue out, you know, take some green out, this is how we can do this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows. Let's take the effect, let's drag and drop it down onto the shot, and let's come in here. We're going to step back into effects mode. I'm just going to close the effects palette here. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that by option dragging that down onto my shot, most people think, oh, okay, cool. I'm ready to now take this. Let's add blue to this. Oh, well, it's adding blue to everything. And you can actually see my on-screen widgets right here. There we go. Not what we want. And we all know that this is a limitation of Media Composer. What's important to keep in mind is that, you know, this has been a limitation of Media Composer probably since its inception, and to be perfectly honest, I don't think it's something that Avid is going to fix anytime soon. Why? Because they have great partner companies like Boris Effects that come in and specialize in giving you solutions to problems like that. What we're going to do is we're going to come in, and I'm going to come actually first down to Chroma Key Studio. Let's actually just scroll up BCC Color Balance, scroll down Chroma Key Studio. Because what I need to do now is I need to tell the BCC Effects that I'm going to use multi-filters here. And what I want the effects to do is to only impact the element, in this case, the actual chroma key guy that the color balance effect is applied to. So let's do that. I'm going to come down to title and matte, drop that down, and we're going to tell the effect that this is a multi-filter start. Now, as soon as I do, you're going to see the background blurs out. That's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll fix that in just a second. I'm going to come up to color balance. I'm going to twirl that down, and again, inside title matte, for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the effect that this is a multi-filter end. And as soon as I do, all the background goes back to being normal. But here's the big difference. Now, if I take the blue and I start cranking it up, it only affects my talent. Okay? Now, I think what we're going to do here is I'm just going to put the blue back to 0. Let's just bring some red out. Put that about, I don't know. Sure, minus 57. We'll put this at about, I don't know, minus 25. Sure. We'll just give some blue back to this here. What I'm going to do is, once I got it about there, is we're just going to mix this with the original, just because I want it to kind of be a blue haze. That's looking good. Okay? And if I bypass the effect, now obviously you see it with the blurred background, but that's okay. That's what he looked like before. That's what he looks like now. He's got a little bit more realism. Now, something else that I didn't mention at the start is that with this background, we've actually zoomed in on it. Okay? It's an actual moving image. And of course, we all know, and you can actually see it. It's a little bit hard to see from here, but if I actually step back into effects mode and I just zoom in here, you can see down at floor level as I move through, we have some grain, obviously, in this shot, or it could be compression. And what's important to keep in mind, again, we'll just zoom back, is that as soon as we start zooming in on this image, let's just step out of effects mode here, is that as soon as we start zooming in, obviously the grain is going to become much more noticeable than it was previously. So let's add some grain to our chroma key guy here. So again, right back to our effects palette, Command and 8 on the Mac, Control and 8 on Windows. Let's come to film style. Of course, we can just take film grain again, Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, drag it down. Of course, because color balance is now the middle effect, let's set it to be the multi-filter mid, and BCC film grain is the multi-filter end. Just like such. Now if I zoom in here, let's just zoom in, you can see that we have some grain. I can actually just bypass that. So there's the before, there's the after. Now there is one last thing I could do if I wanted to get super realistic with this, and this is actually kind of cool. What I could do is, of course, again, we're going to copy this into the clipboard here. There we go. And I'm just going to paste him onto V2, or drop him in. Technically it's pasted him. I'm just overwriting nothing on V2. And I'm going to step into the effect. And what I want to do is I want to flip him. So basically rotate him 180 degrees, and I'm going to do that again by simply coming down to the bottom of film grain. I don't need to go any lower than film grain, down to geometrics. Let's take our tumble. These ones always mess me up. There we go, tumble. And let's just set that to be like 180 degrees, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to position him towards the bottom of the screen. Kind of about, I don't know, maybe about there. Now I'm just going to monitor this layer here. That's not too bad. Maybe we'll just come back just a little bit. And of course, way too untransparent, if that's even a term. I don't even know if that's a term. What we're going to do is we're going to head right back up to the general controls, and I'm just going to bring away the effect opacity just so that this looks like reflection on the floor, kind of like that. Now I would play this back, but of course, because of the GoToWebinar setup, it wouldn't play back very well over the internet. But you can see that we've now created a super realistic looking composite with most of the work being done inside of Chroma Key Studio. Okay, so let's move on. What I'm going to do here is just close the effects palette here. Now we're going to talk about two new effects, and we're going to talk about a new tool sort of in the next section. And let's talk about BCC two-strip color process, which mimics the old Technicolor two-strip color process from sort of the classic days of cinema. And of course, because it is a film effect or a film style, you can find it right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call up film effects here, or the film effects timeline, and I've got 3 shots here. And what I want to do is I want to get in and I'm going to apply two-strip color to these 3 shots. Now how most people would do that is they take two-strip color and they drag and drop it onto each shot, or they would collapse these down and then apply it to 3 of them. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to step into effects mode. I'm going to select all 3 of those, and then I'm simply going to hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and let's just double click on two-strip color, and you can see that what it's done when I double click on the effect and I can take a look inside is it's basically nested those 3 shots inside of this effect. Okay, now here's the situation we always run into, especially with an effect like two-strip color process. Two-strip color process is a very cool effect, and you can create so many different looks with it. But where do you even begin? Because in most cases, you'll get in, you'll start coming in, you'll say, okay, well, let's start adjusting saturations, we'll just start adjusting brightness. And then most people are like, okay, well, I don't really have time for this, I'm going to go back to a different effect. Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to undo what I just did, put everything back the way it was. Because what we're going to do is we're going to use a fantastic new tool inside of pretty much every effect inside of BCC9, and of course I'm talking about the FX browser. Now the FX browser comes in 2 flavors. It comes in the integrated FX browser and it comes in the standalone FX browser. Now the integrated FX browser means that it's integrated or included in every effect across BCC9. You can actually see it right here, Show FX Browser. You can actually also find it right up here inside your effects palette right here, BCC Browser. Now this is the standalone browser. Now what is the difference? Well, don't worry. I'll get to what the difference is in just a second. But for right now, I need to find a cool look for my 3 shots. So let's do that. What we're going to do is we're going to head back on over to the effects editor. I'm simply going to click on Show the Effects Browser. And now let me just zoom back here a little bit. Because what you're looking at now is all of the presets that are included inside of two-strip color process. So this is actually a great way, because how we used to have to do this in the past if I cancel out is we'd actually have to come to the drop down. We'd have to say, okay, show me blown out green. oh, okay, show me, blown out heat. Or I could say, show me the next preset, show me the next one, show me the next one. Oh, and the producer's like, oh no, I like the one, I like the one from a couple versions ago. Okay, well, let's just, click, and then it can become a big mess really quick, okay? What I'm gonna do is just switch this one right back to no preset. Actually, what I should do is just switch back to the default, which is nothing. And let's come back in here, and let's come back to the effects browser, and you can see that basically the way things work is that the screen is divided up into 3 sections. We have our presets over here on the left, we have our preview window over here on the right, and then of course we have our history down here. So if a producer was to ever say, oh, I like the one that you showed me 2 presets ago, you can easily get in using the history and select the exact one that they were talking about. But let's pick a preset here. Let's choose, I don't know. Let's choose Pale Fire DD. Sure, why not? We'll choose this one. Now, of course, I've selected it, and you'll see that I can obviously click on any one and select them. And as I select them, they're appearing down here in the history. But when I select Pale Fire DD, I actually need to see what is going on with this preset. Okay? Well, doing that is actually very simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the preview window, and I can either press the play button right here. I'm simply going to hit the space bar. You'll see that right now what it's doing is it's going through at about 12 frames per second. You'll see that my footage is 1280 by 720, so it's 720p. And you'll see that it's going through each one of the shots, because obviously the effect was applied to all 3 shots. Now it's actually dropped down to 11 frames per second. So the client's like, well, this is terrible. This is not going to tell me what I need to know. We need to actually take a look at this. So, apply this and we'll render it. Actually, we don't need to render it because it's real time, and then we'll take a look at it. But guess what the best part is? What was actually happening was that it was actually previewing right there as I was talking. So you'll see now that this is actually playing back in real time this preset over top of my footage. Very cool. Now, what's always going to happen? The producer's going to say, well, wait a second, I forgot what this looked like originally. Can you tell me what this looked like or show me what this looked like originally? No problem. I have compare mode right here. I can actually split the screen and say, well, this is what it looked like before. So now you can see what the elephant looked like before and what the elephant looks like after. What you could also do is you can actually, depending on what you're applying this to, if I was applying this to a title or something like that, we could actually get in and decide to composite this over black, over a checkerboard, or over the actual background that the title is on top of. So you'll see that having this preview window here is just a fantastic tool. And of course you might say, well, let's say you'd applied something like a GoPro lens correction that we're going to get to in just a second. Let's say we'd applied that to, a 5-minute long shot. And the producer says, I only need to see, 5 seconds of it. Oh, okay, no problem. What we're going to do is we're just going to set this to be about, I don't know, about that range. That's probably about the length of the shot here. And once we get there, that's a little bit longer. That's okay. But we can actually choose the exact range that we want to see. Of course, again, previewing it for me in real time. Very cool. Okay, now, of course, if I want to apply this to my shots, all I need to do is simply say apply, and boom, there we go. So you'll see getting in and using the FX browser is, especially with an effect like two-strip color process, these two go hand in hand with each other. They're essentially made for each other because you don't have a lot of time to get in and choose a preset when you're working. Best part is that you can pick a preset, then come in and start playing around with the parameters that you have here to really get the look the way that you want. Okay, now, so what is the difference between the integrated FX browser and the standalone FX browser? What we're going to do here is I'm just going to come back into the bin here. I think what I'll do here is we'll just step into this shot here. I'm just going to step in like such. And I'm going to step out of effects mode. I'm just going to come back to the effects palette here. Let's come back to the browser. I'm just going to choose the full BCC effects browser, drag and drop. Okay? And again, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did before. Step into effects mode. Now you'll see that once I step into effects mode, this is where I can actually tell the effect that I'm going to apply this to a title or matte, what the alpha is, whether I want to invert the title or matte, and what the background is. Because remember, I told you just a little while ago that inside of the effects browser, you can actually get in and put a title over top of your background. Well, this is where you're going to tell it what the background is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the FX browser. Now, as soon as I do, you're going to see that in here, things are sort of laid out a little bit differently. You'll see that I have all of these presets here. Now, what exactly is going on here? Well, we all know that we run into picky producers. It always happens. They'll get in, they'll say, well, I want to apply a film effect, but I really don't know which one. You think to yourself, it may be I'm just going to show them all of the presets inside of the film style category. Well, here's where you can actually come in and come to the film style category. Maybe I'll just narrow this down a little bit first. Let's do our fast film process. I'm just going to select fast film process, and you'll see now that I'm only seeing the presets from that category. But what I can also do is I can actually say, well, you know what? Show me all of the ones from BCC's film style. And there they all are. Now this is where the producer could say, oh, okay, well, I really sort of like, what I saw inside of film damage with this one. Okay, I can't apply anything from here, but this is what's going to sort of point me in the right direction, saying, okay, I know that now I can get in, I can apply film damage, hop into film damage, and then really pick the preset that I want to work with. So you'll see the best part is that the team at Boris Effects is really giving you an option. If you have the PA producer that doesn't know what they want, you can be super general in looking at all the presets, or get specific and use the integrated FX browser with whichever effect you happen to be working with. Now, I do want to point something else out here. Let me just undo what I just did. I'm just going to remove that. Let me come back to film style here, because I've talked about almost all of the effects inside of BCC 9 are real time. Of course, we know that they're real time because we see the little green dot beside them. Now, like I said, almost all of them. Now, there's effects like deinterlace that are not real time, but there are also other ones like this one here that says film process, which is real time. And then I have this BCC film process MT. Well, the film process one is real time, but this MT one is not. Most people don't know what the difference is between the two. It's very simple. Film process, motion tracker. The motion tracker part of the effect doesn't make it real time. But the team at Boris Effects doesn't want to limit you in working with these effects in real time by only having the motion tracker version available to you. So guess what? If you need the motion tracker, you can use that one, but take into account the fact that it won't play back in real time. If you don't need the motion tracker, go crazy with the ones that have the real time green dot beside it, drop it into your timeline, hit play, and go crazy. Now, something else that I do want to show you, of course, is that in the past, one of the most common, well, not in the past, it's probably in just about everybody's project these days. One thing we always add is a vignette, but in the past, the only way that I've been able to do a vignette is I got to create something in Photoshop, which never really looked very good, or I have to get into Marquee and sort of fake it in Marquee. But now, of course, inside of BCC 9, right below 2-strip color, we of course have access to vignette. Now I'm just going to option drag this down onto my shot. You'll see right there, it appears. I don't need to worry about getting in and doing anything like stacking the effects. Why? Because this effect is being applied to the entire shot. It's not like I'm just applying it to a composite that I've already created in the shot. And what's cool about vignette, besides the fact that you can now create vignettes in real time inside of your Media Composer timeline, is the fact that you can get in. I'm just going to adjust the radius of this a little bit just so that you can see it a bit better. Is that we have the ability to do a color vignette. We can get in and do a blur, so just blur out the edges, or of course, we can do both. Now, one last thing that I do want to point out here. And I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove vignette here just for a second here. We're going to go back to the pretty cool 2-strip color that I created here. Let's just come in, let's just mess some things up here. Sure, why not? Let's just create some different colors here. It doesn't even really matter what I create. You'll see why in just a second. Okay, so there's my awesome new look. I've created this really cool look that I know the producer is going to love. So what I'm going to do, we're going to come right back up here to my no preset. I'm going to save this. We're going to call this Kevin's Super Awesome Preset. Okay, I'm going to say save. And of course, now what's going to happen is that this is going to get removed because someone else is working on some stuff. They're just going to apply it to this shot right here. So of course, we're going to come right back to our 2-strip color. They're going to apply that. Let's come into the effects browser and I say, you know what? I created this really cool preset that you really should use. It's called Kevin's Super Awesome Preset, of course. And all they need to do now is simply come down to Kevin's Super Awesome Preset right here. And they can preview this, realize how really unsuper awesome it is, and then pick a different preset to work with. But you can see that as you get in and save your own presets, they're going to appear inside of the FX browser as well. Okay, so let me just cancel out because it's super awesome as my effect is. We really don't want to see that. Okay, so let's move on here. And let's talk about, we're talking about essential tools. And I mean, really, the FX browser is a perfect example of an essential tool that you're going to want to use. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove this shot because we're going to talk about something right now. Just going to remove that sequence. Let's talk about, and I always jokingly say this is my claim to fame, and this is why it's so important that if you have an idea for something, if you think something's not quite working right, it's important to send that email to support@borisfx.com because about a month and a half before BCC 9 launched, I sort of said to the team, I said, you know what I really, really need? I need GoPro lens correction inside of my Media Composer. Because, GoPros and, I mean, we talk about GoPros, but it's really action cameras in general are all the rage. But one problem, a common problem that we run into is that GoPro fisheye look that, of course, you can fix, obviously, if you're using GoPro Studio, which I have right here. The whole point is I don't want to have to go into GoPro Studio, do the work, save it out, then bring it to Media Composer. Especially now working inside of, 2K, and higher resolutions using GoPros, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to AMA link to the desktop. I have a clip here, and it's right here, and this is a clip from Jeff Foster. Jeff Foster is the pixel painter. You can actually check out his very cool work with GoPro quadcopters at thepixelpainter.com. And what we're going to do is we're going to do some GoPro lens correction on this, and then I'm going to show you, this is sort of a very common example of a GoPro lens correction. I'm going to show you something that's not really as common, but it's something that in most cases the producer would just say, well, forget it. I don't have time for you to fix that. But I'm going to show you how you can fix something really in a matter of seconds. Okay, first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to right-click. We're going to come to our source settings, and let's come to our frame flex here, just because I want to get rid of that quadcopter. Kind of like that. There we go. It's going to say apply. We're going to say OK, and let us make sure. There we go. Perfect. Quadcopter is now gone. Let's take this. Let's drop it into our timeline. Now, I know that GoPro lens correction really cannot be as simple as going into effects mode. We're going to come to the image restoration category. I know it really can't be as simple as taking the GoPro or the lens correction effect and simply dragging and dropping it onto our shot, but believe it or not, it actually is. Take a look at the difference in the before and after here. You'll see the tracks are now straight. This is the before with the fisheye look, and here's the after. Boom, done. Really, drop it into your timeline, throw the effect on, hit play, you're all set to go. In the most common of situations, and you can't see me doing it, I'm doing the quotes thing with my hands. In the most common of situations, this is what you would do. But what about a little bit more of an uncommon situation that you might run into? Let me just come back to my bin here. And this is an example of something that we're going to fix right here. Okay? And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove all of this here. There we go. And you can see that we have this shot here of downtown London. I'm going to assume it's London because it's got double-decker buses, but when we're in Vegas, I saw double-decker buses driving up and down the strip, so who knows? This might be, the English part of Las Vegas. And most people would look at a shot like this, even a producer would look at a shot like this and be like, you know what, this is fine, go with it, don't even worry about it, we don't have time to fix this. But you know what, we have a few issues going on here. And what I'm going to do is, believe it or not, the grid or your safe title, safe action is really a fantastic tool. Now, you guys can't see me do this. I'm just going to move my GoToWebinar tools out of the way just because I need to see my preview window here or my sequence window here. And like I said, obviously this is for seeing things safe title, safe picture. But it's also a great way to get in and get an idea of exactly what is going on and really how much lens correction a shot might need. Now what I'm going to do is just step into effects mode here. And I'm just going to zoom in on the right side of the screen. I'm just going to move over here like such. And you can actually see how badly the lens is actually bent. When we take a look at this shot, take a look at the edge of the window. This should really be more or less straight going all the way up. But it's not. And the other issue that we have going on here is you can actually see the window of the bus. Now most people will say, just zoom in, but we're not going to do that. We're actually going to fix two problems at the same time. And how we're going to do it again is with lens correction. Again, I'm going to hit Command and 8 on the Mac, Control and 8 on Windows. Let's come to lens correction. We're going to take it, drag and drop it down here onto our shot. Now as soon as I do, you'll see that the default for the effect is to do the GoPro lens correction. And obviously that's way more than what we need, because this was only a very slight issue that we had going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step into effects mode, and believe it or not, we're just going to turn correction off completely. So basically we have everything back the way it was before. And let's sort of get back to where we were, which is right about there. I'm just going to zoom in here. Okay. Come back over to our window. Let's come back one frame here. There we go. Just so we can see the problem over here on the right-hand side. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a slight correction. Not as much. I believe 40 was what it was at. Let's do a very slight correction. Let's do a correction of about 8. Okay. Now you can see that we're sort of getting to where we want it to be. Let's just come back to here. We still have that bent window. It's just not as bad as it was. The problem is it's still there. Now, of course, at this point, the producer's going to be like, whatever, you fix that window problem up here. It's fine. Just go with it. No, you know what? Like I said, when you're doing this, and of course it's taking me a few minutes to explain it, but when you're doing this, It should literally take you seconds to fix this. Because there's another fantastic parameter inside of lens correction right down here that's called vertical perspective and horizontal perspective. Now, I'm going to zoom in again. Watch what happens as soon as I adjust the vertical perspective here. I'm going to just adjust it ever so slightly with a value of 2. Boom. Take a look at the window now. Now the window is perfectly aligned. Now the producer may have said, you know what, there really wasn't that much of a difference between the before and after. And you know what you can say to him or her when they say that? You can say, you know what, there really was. Look at the difference now. Huge difference with really only a minor adjustment. Now you're probably also wondering what exactly is going on with the sky as I'm bypassing the effect. The sky gets brighter and then it gets darker. Well, with pretty much all of the effects inside of BCC 9, inside of the general controls, you'll see that we have safe levels turned on. So if anything is outside of safe, of course it'll be cropped off, which is actually very handy, especially if you're doing things like color correction or color grading. You don't ever have to worry about sending, a station something that's, completely out of legal levels, because you'll always have safe levels turned on. But of course, if you want the flexibility of turning it off, no problem. You can simply do it right there. Okay, so let's move on to another situation. This is actually one that I sort of see all the time, especially now with HD, because everyone now talks about 4K, and 4K is fantastic. There's so much detail. You can take 4K and drop it into your 1920 by 1080 timeline and Media Composer, and you can work with it. Blah blah blah. But what about a situation where maybe you were taking DVC Pro footage 720p and working with it in a 1080p timeline, or you were taking footage that really just wasn't shot that sharp, and you need to improve the quality of it. Well, this is where the new Magic Sharp filter comes in. Now, I know most people think to themselves, oh, you know what, these sharpening filters, they never really work very well. It just, the end product just never really looks that good. Well, trust me, when you see the BCC 9 Magic Sharp, you're going to be getting in and you're going to be using this on tons of stuff. Okay, so let me show you how simple this is to work with. What I'm going to do, Command and 8 on the Mac, Control and 8 on Windows. Again, because we're talking about image restoration, now what's important to keep in mind is that I talked about tools. Take a look at this. DV Fixer, Dust and Scratches, Flicker Fixer, Lens. These are all tools. Yes, they're effects, but they're tools. Look at all the different tools that we have in here. And like I said, we're going to be talking about Magic Sharp. Again, real time. I'm going to take Magic Sharp, drag and drop it right down here onto my shot. Now, as soon as I do, let's step into effects mode here. Let's zoom in. Okay. Now, you're going to see that it's actually already done something. I'll just bypass the effect. You'll see that what's happened is that we've got a little bit of detail back, but we've also now introduced all of this noise. Great thing with the effect is that we do have a noise suppression. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that at a value of about 8. The only problem is that as soon as I start adjusting the noise suppression and I bypass, take a look, it's kind of like I haven't even applied the effect at all. So what do we do? Well, it's actually very easy. We know that we need that noise suppression for the sky, because I don't want any of that noise introduced in the sky. So all I'm going to do is, instead of getting most people to get in, they start adjusting the sharpen amount. They're like, oh, this doesn't look very good. What am I supposed to do? Like, take a look at that. That looks terrible. Well, believe it or not, we're actually not even going to adjust. I'm just going to undo that here. We're not even going to adjust the sharpen amount at all. All I'm going to do is take the sharpen threshold, and I'm going to start dragging it up. And I want you to take a look at what's happening to the building. Now, what I should do here, there we go. Drag it right up here. You can see now, look at the detail that I've got back in the building. I've gotten a ton of detail back in the building and even in the elephant. But you know what? Here's now, once I have this the sharpen threshold pulled up, where we're going to start adjusting the sharpen amount. Take a look at that. Let me show you the before and after, because in most cases, people kind of forget what the before and after look like. Take a look. Before, after. And the most important thing is we really haven't introduced, now what I could do is I'll just maybe back off on this a little bit, okay? We really haven't introduced that much noise to the sky. You'll see if I come back to noise suppression, we put that back, that's what it was. The noise suppression, take a look. But all the detail has really been added back to the building and the elephant. Now, of course, I am zoomed in like 200% here, so let me just zoom back here all the way, okay? This is what it was before. Take a look at the difference now. Look at all the detail you get back in the trees and in the road and even in the elephants. Now, I'm going to guess that that's paint. I hope that's not giant, bird droppings or anything like that. But you can see the before and the after is huge. Now, believe it or not, we actually had something going on with this shot, first of all. Now, what I'm going to do here is is I'm actually just going to take this effect, I'm going to stick it into my image restoration because it's kind of hard to see here. But you can actually see that the shot is shaking. Now, when I demoed this originally, I could hit play, but again, because we're watching this as a webinar, it will probably completely bog down your connection. But there's a bit of a shake going on here. You can actually see it mostly in the road right here. So what I'm going to do, actually, before we even add the magic sharp, is we'll take optical stabilizer, again, real time. Of course, it tells me that I actually have to analyze this shot first, so let's analyze it. Now, of course, depending on the size of your shot, the speed of your computer, this time will vary, but of course we are talking about an HD shot here. There we go. Now, as soon as the effect is done analyzing, you'll see that it's jumped in. And I've got this kind of cool close-up of the elephant, not quite what I wanted. I actually wanted the shot just to be stabilized, not zoomed in on. Well, what's actually happening here, you'll take a look over here in the effects editor, is that right now the mode that it's set to is analyze, or pardon me, is stabilize. What we actually wanted to do is just smooth it out. And now what we have is a smooth shot. Cool. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is simply take Magic Sharp, drag and drop it on there, and take a look at the difference now. We now have a smooth shot, and we have all that detail that we've given back. Again, here it is before, the after. Very cool. And I think what we need to do is, as much as I like these trees, what we're going to do is we're going to give some color back to them. So let's do that. What we're going to do, of course, is I'm going to come back to the effects palette. Let's come back to my film style, and let's choose, sure, let's use a fast film process. Again, option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, just drag and drop. Now, of course, I don't know what preset I'm going to use, so let's just go into the effects browser. And you'll see that I can click through, of course. Take a look at the different presets here. Let's choose, sure, let's choose Saturation Boost Deep. Simply going to say apply, and now take a look at what we have. Now I'm going to show you the before and the after here, okay? There's the before, there's the after. Not only do we have a ton of detail back, we've also smoothed this shot out, and we've boosted the color in these trees, and even on the rooftops of the house, to really take this shot to the next level. Okay, so let's move on. Now, we're going to talk about a great previous effect here. And I'm talking about pan and zoom, okay? Now, this is the composite that we're going to create. Now, most people take a look at a pan and zoom effect, or as it's more commonly referred to as the Ken Burns effect. And the first thing they think to themselves is, oh man, all the keyframing I'm going to have to do with this. The keyframing is always a mess, and it's not the initial keyframing. It's when the producer comes in and takes a look and says it's not quite right. Can you adjust this and adjust that? And I should have added the three things that editors always that always drives editors crazy is chroma keying, motion tracking, and doing the pan and zoom effect. But you know what? The pan and zoom effect inside of Boris Continuum Complete is so simple to use. Believe it or not, I created this animation without having to use a single keyframe. And pan and zoom is actually available for everyone that's still using BCC 8. It is available inside of BCC 8. The only problem is that it's missing some cool new features that I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so what the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove all that. Now we've got this cool shot of the Arizona sky. And what we want to do is we want to do our pan and zoom over top of this. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, come into the effects palette. Let's come down to perspective, because it is a perspective effect. You'll find it right here, pan and zoom. Drag and, whoops, let's not drag and drop it onto the shot. Let's drag and drop it onto the layer above it. What's very cool about pan and zoom is that it's an effect that when you apply it, you can actually apply it to a shot. So let's say someone had shot some 4K video of, let's say you were at the Grand Canyon and they shot 4K video of a map. You can actually get in and do pan and zoom over top of that if you wanted to, which is actually kind of cool. But what we want to do instead is I want to step into effects mode here. I don't want to use the host layer. I want to use an external file. And of course I'm going to be asked, okay, well, no external file has been selected. What do you want to use? So I'm simply going to come to the external file button, and I'm going to use this cool map of Southern California, because remember, Southern California does have the road to romance, in case you didn't know that. But you do now. What we're going to do is our road to romance is going to take us from Los Angeles over to Joshua Tree National Monument, and from Joshua Tree National Monument up to our Roads to Romance title up here. So all I'm going to do, and this is a 6K file, so it's huge. All we're going to do is simply say open, and let's do our pan and zoom. Now, of course, I said before, I sort of talked it up, so I better be able to deliver on this. I talked up the fact that I could create a very cool pan and zoom without having to use a single keyframe. So let me show you how I'm going to do this. Okay, first thing I need to do is I need to get a visual representation of what exactly is going on with my cameras. Now, right now I'm going to do a simple A to B animation, and I know that because if I come down to animation, you'll see right here above it is the workflow, A-B auto animation, meaning that A is the start and B at the end, and it's going to do an animation simply from A to B. So what I need to do is say, okay, show me A and B. Now right now you'll see that over here the preview target is right now for setup A. So let's take setup A, and of course we said we were going to start at the City of Angels, Los Angeles, right there. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to end with the setup B over here at Joshua Tree National Monument. Okay, kind of about there. Okay, now I have my preview window up here that you can see the exact move here. Now, one thing for me is that I never like ease in and ease outs and holding at the start of my moves. Now that's turned on by default, but you know what? It's very easy to adjust. I can actually do it right over here. Inside of animation, you'll see right here, hold start, hold end, ease in and ease out. So you see the flexibility you have over top of the parameters inside of pan and zoom. Now let's come right back to the position A for a second, because you know what? I want to actually look at where I'm going. So let's go back to setup A. I actually want to look towards Joshua Tree National Monument as we're moving towards it. Now inside of BCC 8 that was not possible, but inside of BCC 9, pan and zoom has been improved to add the ability to enable 3D. Now as soon as you do that, you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know, nothing's really changed, but something has changed. You'll see that if I come down to my transforms right here, right now I have my position A, my scale A, and my rotation A. Now rotation A just basically rotates things like this. Okay, we'll just undo that. But what I want to do is I actually want to rotate in the y-axis, no problem. All I'm going to do is simply come up here and I'm going to enable 3D, and once I do, I now have rotation, spin, and tumble. So now I can spin the whole map so that we're looking towards Joshua Tree National Monument. We'll just take it to about, I don't know, minus 15, minus 16 maybe. And for our setup B, let's just set this again as we go right down here to rotate back the other way. Now, of course, I could punch in a value or I could just rotate like this. And all we're going to do now is simply come back up here. We're going to turn preview mode off. We're starting at the beginning. I'm going to drag through again because, like I said, if I hit play, we're just going to bog everything down. And basically what I've done is an unkeyframe move from one point to another. Now, of course, I've also made this like 17 seconds long, which is like super long, way longer than I need it. Because you know that producer's going to come in, they're going to say, what have you done? 17 seconds, way too long. I only need this to be about 5 seconds. So let's come down to about 5 seconds here. And what you need to do at 5 seconds is hold it for about 2 seconds before you move on to the next thing, which is our road to romance. So what we're going to do at this point is most people think, okay, Kev, you're going to get in, you're going to start keyframing. I'm not going to keyframe at all. What I'm going to do is simply hit F6 on the keyboard, which is my shortcut to add an edit. If you don't have it mapped, you can actually find it right here, add edit. You'll see as soon as I add the edit, our animation has suddenly changed. We're back to Los Angeles again. Well, I'm going to come back to the beginning, just drag through. You'll see there's my move from Los Angeles to Joshua Tree National Monument. And then the animation jumps and starts at the beginning again and does the exact same animation. Well, that's very interesting. So conceivably, if I wanted this to stop for about 2 seconds and I came down to about here, if I added another edit, what would happen is it would do the same animation 3 times. Yeah, look at that. Well, you know what I really wanted to do? What I actually wanted to do is I don't want it to do an A-B auto animation. Well, I know that B is the very end of the first animation. So you know what? I really just wanted to sit here, and I just wanted to sit at the B position. So now what's going to happen is it's going to move from A to B and then hold at the B position and then jump again. But let's say just for hypothetical purposes, I wanted to do a ping pong effect. You know what? I'm just going to switch from an A-B animation to a B-A animation. And now what happens is we now have a ping pong. It moves to Joshua Tree. It holds at Joshua Tree. And then it moves back. And what we want to do is we just want to change Los Angeles to be our road to romance. So let's do that. What we're going to do, step back into effects mode. Let's come down to preview mode. What's important to keep in mind is that what we want to do is we want to adjust the A position. So let's switch to setup A, because here, remember, we're now doing a B to A auto animation. So let's come back down here. Let's set our spin to be 0. Let's set our position to be up here at the road to romance. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, let's tumble it back a little bit here. And we'll just position this right about here. And of course what we now have if we come back here and we switch out of preview mode, is we now have a move from Los Angeles to Joshua Tree. We hold the Joshua Tree, and then we move up to show the Road to Romance. Now, of course, I was showing you a very basic animation. Now, everything that I'm showing you in BCC 8, obviously, this will work in BCC 8, but the cool thing is that now I obviously cut a little bit off the top of the screen, but that's okay. What's important to keep in mind is that you don't have the flexibility that you do inside of BCC 9 of now getting in and rotating your images however you want. So let's say you want to, fly over, North America, creating sort of an Indiana Jones, flying effect. You could very well do that by rotating the map inside of BCC 9. Now, what I want to do is, of course, I'm all about taking this to the next level. Now, what I think I'm going to do here before I do that is let me just fix this animation here, just because that's bugging me a little bit. So, of course, preview mode, of course, setup A. Let's just reposition this about here. Very nice. Okay, so there we go. There's our Road to Romance. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a composite effect, because we do have the ability to add transfer modes inside of Media Composer. So let's go back to the effects palette. Let's just make sure that I'm still in effects mode here. And what we want to do is we want to come to Key and Blend, because composite is a blend mode. So what we're going to do is simply hold Option on the Mac, Alt and Windows, double click. And what we're going to do is we're going to step into the effect, and I'm going to use not hard light. We're going to use a darken transfer mode. But of course, I don't want to see the ground in my little composite here. So what we want to do is come right down to the bottom to the awesome pixel chooser. Let's turn the pixel chooser on. Let's come down. We're going to choose a linear gradient, just like such. We're going to rotate it. Let's actually rotate this about 90 degrees. There we go. That's actually the other way. Let's do minus 90. There we go. And let's just soften this up a lot. And we're just going to adjust its Y position. Kind of like that. And what we now have is a very cool, very simple to create pan and zoom or Ken Burns effect, then composite it over top of. This could be time-lapse sky, could be really whatever we wanted it to be. Very cool. Okay, so let's move on. A couple more things that I do want to show you. And let's talk about something that, to be perfectly honest, in the past, I never got really excited about, but I'm now very excited about. And that is transitions. Let's talk a little bit about transitions inside of BCC 9, because believe it or not, we actually have 20 new transitions. And I'm going to come into, again, the effects palette, Command and 8, Control and 8 for all my Windows friends out there. We're going to come down to transitions. And one thing I always like to do, to use this as an example, is that what the team at BCC does, or at Boris Effects does, is they take a look at the most popular effects inside of BCC 9 and they say, okay, how can we make a cool transition out of this? And one that I always use, and this is something that most editors say, I never, ever use those transitions. I never use them. But I can tell you there's one transition that you use all the time. And you could tell me that you don't, but I know that you're lying. And that is the flash to white. Everybody uses the flash to white. I use it all the time. Okay? But the thing is, the flash to white is very one-dimensional. It is just a flash to white. But what if we had the ability to get in and use variations of the flash to white? But instead of it just being a flash to white, it was more of a lens flare effect. Well, take a look at this. Inside of the effects palette, I actually have access to 4 different lens flare 3D style transitions. I have lens flash, lens flare spiked, lens flare round, and lens flare dissolve. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the lens flash. And most people think, okay, once you take the effect and apply it, it's very one-dimensional. You just take it, there's our transition. It happens in the middle of the screen. Okay, it's done. So that's really going to, hold everybody's interest for about 2 seconds. Then, then what am I going to do? Well, believe it or not, the team at Boris Effects has gotten in and done a ton of work on the transition effects. Now, how do I know this? Well, take a look at this. First of all, as soon as I step into effects mode, you're going to see that I now have all of these on-screen widgets of things that are happening inside of the effect. Now, what I wanted to do here, if I come back to the original shot, is, you know what? This actually effect is kind of bugging me where it is. I'm just going to move it out of the way for a second so I can talk about this. Well, believe it or not, that's actually the first thing that I wanted to show you, is that I can actually take the position of the lens flare and really put it wherever I want. So, for example, if I want my little guy here to be taking a picture of his friend up here on top of I think those are dragons, is that we're going to take it and position it right over top of his camera. And you'll see now that the transition happens exactly where I told the effect to have it happen. And you see something else is going on, that as the effect happens, we have a dissolve that's happening. Now, how do I know this? Well, I can actually see it happening in the background. But believe it or not, I can actually also see it right here because you can see that as I hover over the on-screen widget, it's telling me that there's a dissolve duration right there. Now, for me, this dissolve happens way too long because I really just want to keep this flash the way it is, but I want this dissolve to almost be like a soft cut, no problem. I'm just going to take the on-screen widget and just drag it like this. And you'll see now that really, boom, that happens almost like a soft cut. You see the flexibility you have with the on-screen widgets, very simple to use. What you can also do is come right up to the top here and you can actually ease the midpoint of the effect or ease in the start and the end. Very cool. I'm just going to undo that just for the purpose of what I'm doing because I also want to show you that what we can also do is I'm just going to bypass the effect for 1 second because I really want to sort of go with a blue flash. So let's take the flare color. Let's just actually pick the sky over here as the flare color. Let's unbypass the effect. And now we have the blue. And of course, we can get in. I can say, well, you know what? I need this to be a little bit brighter just so that it fills the entire window. Now, 20 wasn't what I wanted. 120 was what I wanted. Boom. So you'll see, and now again, I haven't done one single keyframe at all, but take a look at the absolute control I now have over this transition. It's very, very cool. And of course, what's important to keep in mind, I'm just going to remove this effect here. Now, what I should also show you, this is one thing I love to do, is that let's say I wanted to use this transition in multiple cases, I could simply drag it right out to the bin here. We'll just call this Kevin's transition. I could, of course, select multiple transition points here. Or let's just say I didn't want to do this one here. And I can simply double click on it. And now I've applied that to all these different shots. Very cool. Now I do want to point out, I'm just going to pick one of the different lens flare effects because you're going to see that inside of this version of lens flash, I don't really have a ton of parameters at my disposal. But what I can do is if I remove the effect, let's actually just choose, let's choose lens flare dissolve. Sure, why not? Just take that, drag and drop it. You'll see that I now pretty much have all of the parameters at my disposal that I have inside of lens flare 3D. So you can see, depending on your needs, this is where you can really get in and start customizing and literally creating hundreds of different transitions depending on the type of show that you're working on. Now, you know, I could sit here and talk about transitions for hours, but one that I do want to show you, and this is one that I love, is let's come back into the effects palette here, is the damaged TV dissolve. I love this one. Why? Because it really is going to simulate, you know, sort of those old days of changing channels. Boom, transition. Very cool. And of course, this is based on the damaged TV effect. And of course, again, we do have different presets in here that you can get in. And of course, create your own very quickly and very easily. You can get in, add more damage, you know, add more of a roll offset, you know, come in here, you know, to have more scan lines, you know, let's adjust the, you know, the spacing of them and stuff like that. Again, save this as a preset and you're all set to go. So really the flexibility inside the transitions, you know, the options are really infinite as to, you know, the choice that you have. Okay, so let's move on. I want to quickly talk about two last things. And believe it or not, we're actually going to talk about one of them in the form of a transition. So first thing I want to talk about is the new grunge effect. And we actually have two flavors of grunge. We have grunge and we have edge grunge. Now I'm going to talk just about grunge right now because edge grunge is the perfect type of effect to use on titles. But grunge is a very cool effect as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create my own little transition here between these two shots. And let's come back to the effects palette. Let's come to, of course, it is a stylized effect. You'll see there is grunge right there, and there is edge grunge. Very nice. I'm just going to take grunge, drag and drop it down onto my shot. And as soon as I do, you're going to see now that we have a piece of grunge, I guess is the best way to call it. And what's important to keep in mind about these grunge elements is that they're actually 4K big, which is very cool. And you'll see that I have the ability to come in and choose from a whole bunch of different grunge looks. Now, what I'm going to do is just choose this really ugly looking cardboard. And of course, if I had this cardboard in my house, I would seriously have a problem and need to probably fumigate my house right away. But what I want to do is I want to create a cool transition using this grunge look. But believe it or not, I'm going to create the transition without using the grunge texture itself. So let's get in and let's mess up these two shots here and create a transition. You know, people riding one way, people riding the other way. So let's do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my shake. Let's turn some shake on. Let's not have any X position. Let's just have a super Y position here. And let's turn my source shake on so my source actually shakes. You'll see as I drag through here. There we go. That's my daughter taking a nap in the background. People can probably hear her screaming in the background. But we'll just keep going on here. What I'm going to do is just turn motion blur on here, and let's just drag through, and you can see that we now have some motion blur on our shot here. But we want to get in and really mess this up. So let's add some flicker here. We'll just add a ton of it. Let's add some, one of my favorite parameters in here is chromatic abrasion. So let's add that here. Let's turn chromatic abrasion on here, and let's come down to the shift amount. Let's just take the shift amount and crank it way out. Now I actually need to have this transition on, because right now all it's going to do if I drag through is just cut on, do the transition, and then cut off. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to do this the lazy man way. Now I could get in and I could animate each one of the parameters separately, but what I think I'm going to do here is I'm going to come in and we're just going to, like I said, I'm going to do this the lazy man way just for time purposes, and we're going to do this as a mix with original. So let's do that. I'm just going to add a keyframe before the cut and a keyframe after the cut here. And let's add a keyframe down at the end here and at the start. And all we're going to do is just set the mix with original to be at 100 at the start and 100 at the end. So basically what's going to happen is as I drag through, it's going to transition in and transition to the next shot. Now I'm going to try to play this. It might play back through. There we go. Hopefully you saw that sort of play through. But now you're probably thinking, well, Kev, how does this have anything to do with the grunge texture? Well, you know what? Remember, I bypassed that grunge texture at the beginning. Well, let's turn it back on. Okay. Now you're probably thinking, well, Kev, this kind of doesn't really look very good now. Kind of just looks like a grunge that kind of comes and fills the screen. But what we have inside of grunge is the flexibility to get in and use transfer mode. So all I'm going to do is do this as an overlay. Let's come down to overlay here. And now what I have, if I drag through, is a very cool transition here. And what I'll do is, hopefully if I'll just give this a render here just so that I can see if I'll try playing this back, and hopefully everybody can see this when it plays back. Boom. Very cool transition created with grunge. And of course you could take grunge, apply it to whatever you want. You could apply the grunge to titles and basically apply them to the actual title themselves and actually have the title look like, you know, this really grungy look. Of course you can then get in, you can have the title shake and move and have scratches on them and all kinds of things. So grunge is just another one of those, you know, effects. You know, this is you know, the perfect example of an effect that you can get in and just stylize all kinds of different things with. Okay, last but certainly not least, let's talk about BCC laser beam, because most people think, where would I ever use an effect like laser beam? Well, this is where you would use it. Now here's a great shot. This is just a title that was created using Avid effects. Of course, we are looking at the Taj Mahal. What I want to do is create a divider in this title. I just want to basically have a line come across that's going to divide the Taj Mahal and its location. So let's do that. What we're going to do is laser beam is, of course, a light effect. You'll see it right here, laser beam. Of course, we have the motion tracker version of it. Let's just take laser beam. Now, what I need to do is just add an edit in here. Okay, just add it right there. And we're going to apply laser beam just like such. Now, as soon as I do, you're going to see the laser beam appear. It just kind of appears randomly. And let's come down to about here. Let's just position this roughly where we're going to have it go. Okay, kind of like such. That's not too bad. What I can do is in the actual effect itself, you'll see I can come down to the light source, and I can actually adjust its position, its XY position, just so that we have our Y set exactly the way we need it to be. Now that's Y at 305. So let's just put them both at 305 here. That's not too bad. And you'll also see that we have our intensity here, which is, you know, very thick at one end and very thin at the other. So let's adjust that. So you'll see that the inside here we got our position set. Let's set our end width to be about the same. I'm going to set it actually to be very thin. Let's set it to be about 15, I think. Okay, very thin. Okay, and what we also need to do is make sure that the length actually stretches all the way across the screen. Okay, now what we're going to do is have this animate on as our text appears. So we're going to have a keyframe for length set right about there. We're also going to have it start right about there. Now right there, its length is going to be 0. So you'll see that it's basically just going to transition on. Okay? And what we're going to do is as it disappears, we're going to have the laser beam move out. So again, right click, add keyframe, right to about there. Okay? Add keyframe. Okay? Now, I know what you're thinking to yourself right now. Kev, that has to be the most boring divider I've ever seen. Well, you know what? You're right. But you know what? All we wanted to do is we wanted to create this beam that moved across. But really, what happens if you take a laser beam and you shoot it across, let's say, a stage, for example? Then you take a light and you shine it across it. You're going to see little bits of smoke and little bits of dust and little bits of particles. Especially if you'll see in concerts they've added smoke in. So what we have inside of laser beam is the ability, much like inside of stage light, to get in and to add smoke to the effect. Now take a look what happens as soon as I add smoke. Take a look at the difference now. As I drag through, you'll see now that we now have a very cool divider. As the smoke passes through the laser beam, what would actually happen in real life is that would actually happen. If we had a little bit of smoke and a laser beam passing through it, you'd see that as the smoke gets thicker, it'll have direct impact on the laser beam itself. You literally see that I took this effect to the next level by simply adding one little parameter. But you can now see the really cool flexibility you have over laser beam. And of course you could get in, you could say, I don't want the color to be white. I want the color to be, I don't know, yellow. You could get in and adjust the color quickly, literally with the click of the mouse. And again, this is real time, so I could come back. Now, of course, I'm not going to play it again, just because I don't know if the bandwidth would be able to handle it. But you can see, you can now create, let's say you needed, a different color for every bumper of a show. You could quickly and easily get in and create very cool effects, literally in a matter of seconds, using effects like BCC laser beam.